Hello and welcome to another Kangaroo English Daily Digest podcast. My name is Christian and today is Thursday. Definitely the best day of the week. Today I'm going to start by telling 3 dad jokes. So dad jokes are those terrible jokes that make you roll your eyes because they're so bad that they're just not funny. But they're totally related to what I want to talk about today. So they're actually 3 jokes about babies. So the first joke is this. Did you hear about the parents who worked at the instruction book factory? Do you know what they called their baby? Manuel. Okay, joke number 2. How does an astronaut put a baby to sleep? They rocket. And the third and final joke is this. What do you call a group of soldiers full of babies? The infantry. Now, that third and final joke is actually, on one hand, very, what can we say, very interesting from an academic point of view, but it's also very sad because the reason that it's called the infantry in the military is because generally the infantry are foot soldiers who have very kind of basic duties, and so they tend to be less experienced soldiers, and so therefore they also tend to be younger. They tend to be more like babies, like infants. So infantry is literally called the infantry because it's a group of soldiers that are full of babies. And that's actually really sad to think that we have young people going to war. But anyway, that's another that's not anything to do with language. So I want to talk now about infants, because infant actually comes to English from the Persian language, and it comes from infadi, which means cannot speak. Because generally, well, little children, babies, they don't speak. They vocalize, mama, da, da, but they don't speak. But although they can't speak, and physically they're incapable of doing lots of things, they have some incredible cognitive abilities, and that's what I want to talk about. So the first thing is that babies, when they are only 12 months old, they already know what language is and what it's for. So I have in front of me this paper called 12-Month-Old Infants Recognize That Speech Can Communicate Unobservable Intentions. And what they did is they had an adult sitting at a table, and the adult was trying to complete a puzzle. They were trying to balance a ring on the top of another ring, and they had these babies. The babies would watch the adults, and the adult, unfortunately, would fail to complete the task. They would fail to balance the ring on top of this spike. And they had 2 different groups of babies. Now, for the first group, when the adult failed to balance the ring on the spike, another adult would enter the room and go over and do this. They would cough. Okay, and for the second group of babies, The adult would try to balance the hoop, and the hoop would fall, and then an adult would come in and go over and say, blah, 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 blah. So they would speak something that sounded like a human language, but it wasn't actually normal language. It was an invented language. But here's the really interesting thing. So the babies that heard the coughing, they realized that coughing was just an involuntary bodily function, that coughing did not convey any information. But those babies that saw the adult come in and speak something that sounded like language, they realized that it was conveying information. And so those babies expected that when the adults tried again to balance the hoop, they expected them to succeed, because they knew that the person who came in had given the other person some extra information to help them. Now that's pretty amazing. It's pretty incredible to think that at 12 months old, a baby already knows that language is a tool of communication, that language passes information in a magical way through the air from one person to another. It's pretty incredible, right? But that's not the only thing they know. So I have another paper here called Who Can Speak That Language? 11-month-old infants have language-dependent expectations regarding speaker ethnicity. So what they did was they played babies some audio. They played babies some native speakers speaking English, and then they also played some native speakers speaking Cantonese. And the babies had a screen in front of them with a picture of a Caucasian and a picture of an Asian person. And when the babies heard the native English speaker, they automatically looked towards the Caucasian face. And when they heard the Cantonese speaker, they automatically looked towards the Asian face. And so babies who are only 11 months old, they know two really important things about language. They know that language conveys information, and they also know that the way that language communicates, the sound of that language, depends on the way that you look. Now, unfortunately, this, of course, carries on until we are adults, and this has some negative side effects, including, obviously, the creation of accent prejudice, which is something I'm going to talk about in another podcast. But what it shows is that from a very young age, from when we are infants, we have expectations about how people should sound, about accent. And that's a really important difference between accent and pronunciation, because I've been talking a bit about pronunciation over the past few daily digests, and now I want to start separating accent and pronunciation. So pronunciation is how a person produces those individual phonemes or sounds of a language, and then how they combine them to make words, and then how they combine those words to make sentences. That's pronunciation. And accent is your specific pronunciation that tells me where you're from. It tells me lots of other things, but it mainly tells me where you're from. And that means that as adults, we have expectations about how you look and how you sound and what that means. And I have another study here, which is the expectation mismatch effect in accentedness perception of Asian and Caucasian non-native speakers of English. And it was similar to the baby study. So what they did was they had a video recording of people who looked Caucasian, had video recordings of them speaking in English. And then they had video recordings of people who looked Asian also speaking English. But what they did, and this study was done with adults. So first they played the audio to the adults without the video. So the adults heard only the accent and the pronunciation. And they asked the adults to rate the strength of the accent, basically the accentedness of the speech. They asked them to rate it from 1 to 10. And they did that for both speakers. So for the Caucasian-looking person and the Asian-looking person. And then they repeated, but this time they showed them the video. Now here's the weird thing. What they discovered was that if you look Caucasian, so if you look like you come from a native English-speaking country, then the expectation is that you will have a native-like accent. You will sound maybe English or American. And if I show you the video and you look Asian, then my expectation is that you will have some type of strong accent. But what happened is, if I am a Caucasian-looking person like I am in reality, and if I have maybe a German accent or a French accent, or maybe even a Chinese accent, then my accent will be rated as stronger. People will think my accent is more difficult to understand than if I actually looked Asian. So it shows that we have an expectation of the way that people look and how they should sound. So that affects how people perceive the strength of your accent. So if you are, for example, black, if you come from Tanzania and you have a really nice English accent, then people will think that your accent is great. They'll think it's amazing because they're not expecting such a great English accent from somebody who looks like they do not come from a native-speaking country. But, if you look like me and you have a French accent, which also may be really excellent, people will think that your accent is worse because, well, you look Caucasian. You look like you could come from a native English-speaking country. And what I'm trying to do is show you that there are more things at play. There are more than just accent and pronunciation. It's also about culture and expectations. And in the next podcast, I'm going to be talking specifics about what that means for pronunciation and accent. And I'm going to give you some examples from Spanish about why it's important to focus on pronunciation and not accent if you want to have good communication in English. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. I hope that you enjoyed learning about the magical cognitive abilities of babies. I'm Christian, this is Kangaroo English, and I'll see you in class.